As a little boy man growing up in the late 1900s, I learned that there was 3 elements needed to make a great action blockbuster: punches, guns, and cars. Put these 3 things together in any order, crank that dial up to about a 6 or greater, and you had all the makings for a great action film. But remember, that was Lil J. Greene's perspective. As time went on, I was introduced to other things in action films, like plot twist, character arcs, etc. And I soon realized that there was much more to an action film, let alone an ongoing action franchise. Enter the Fast and the Furious. This franchise started way back in 2001 as an obvious Point Break ripoff that was a fun, exciting, and somewhat cheesy action movie in its own right, while still laying the groundwork for future installments through its premise of car lovers and the character development of 2 out of the 7 of its main characters. Dominic Toretto, a man who lives his life 1/4 mile at a time and sticks close to the code of the street.
I never knocked on nobody!
Brian O'Connor, one of the whitest Crips I've ever seen.
Pockets ain't empty, cuz.
Letty, the token tough girl MacGuffin of the whole franchise. Mia Toretto, the cook.
And you've been asking me how the tuna is now. It was crappy yesterday, it was crappy the day before, and guess what?
Jesse, the overly apologetic friend.
I'm so sorry.
Vince. You know, looking back at Vince, he was actually right from the very beginning.
He mows like a cop.
And, oh fuck, what is that guy's name? Leon, that's right, the guy that everybody forgets. Now, this franchise's storylines, plot, and situations are some of the most unique in all of Hollywood history. Not just in front of the lens, but also behind it. It's also a franchise that didn't have the critics on board at the first go, but definitely won over the majority of the audience. And oddly enough, in spite of the success of the first film, its lead star, Vin Diesel, refused to come back to be in the next 2 sequels, basically saying that he wanted the first Fast and the Furious film to go down as a classic, and the way that studios at the time were doing sequels, he felt that the artistic integrity of the franchise would be lost. Listen, from the moment I left that theater after watching the very first Fast and the Furious film, I knew that I wanted an all-black Honda Civic. I was about to get that exhaust, tint them windows, chrome out that engine, install those blue underglow lights, and maybe, just maybe down the road, I was gonna throw in some NOS. Yo, I really believe that. Of course, until I did some research and I quickly found out that that was going to be a horrible and unrealistic financial investment for a young man at my ripe age of 18. So instead, I opted for a Nissan Altima with a CD player and 118 in the trunk. The point is, the first 2, maybe even the first 3 of these films definitely gave an unrealistic influence to a person at my age at the time. But even as impressionable as I was at that age, I would probably never use the term artistic integrity when describing the Fast and the Furious franchise. Now, whether he was joking or not when he actually said this, Vin Diesel is quoted as saying that in order for him to come back to the Fast and the Furious franchise after that first film's success, that this movie would need to have the nuance and the depth akin to a Francis Ford Coppola. But hey, think about it. If we're being real with each other, looking back at these films, the way that Vin Diesel acts in them and their storylines, I personally can see what Vin Diesel believes he's brought to the table. And regardless of the execution of said storylines, the likelihood of this team being able to successfully accomplish each of these missions, and the diminishing verisimilitude of each installment, he might not have come up with The Godfather, but he certainly did turn this franchise into every kid that grew up with toy cars and Hot Wheel tracks' wet dream. Mixed in with the plot of The Fugitive, a little bit of Ocean's 11, and some inspiration and imagination from the 80s G.I. Joe cartoons, I say this with full honesty and sincerity that he was able to create a franchise that at least parts 1 through 6, to me, you could consider the Infinity Saga of this franchise. Fun, creative, and filled with ambition that leads to a meaningful ending to everything. Whereas Fast 7, 8, and 9, for me, tend to be the majority of the DCEU. Directionless, lacking any sense of realism, and blatantly disrespectful to all logic and character development. Nevertheless, this franchise still continues to build in popularity and box office with each installment. Now, the first Fast and the Furious films coming in hot with $207.3 million. Now, that's big money for a movie that came out way back in 2001 with no headline names and being about a group of car junkies that race for pinks and steal DVD players. Side note, I never really thought that deep about it the first 30 times I've seen this movie, But at this time, Dom does own a mildly successful restaurant in spite of its tasteless tuna sandwiches. He owns a thriving mechanic garage, and he constantly wins at street races. So I look back and I'm wondering, what the F do you need to steal for? Anyway, Too Fast, Too Furious takes a joyride from LA to Miami, adding to the cast newcomers Ludacris and Eva Mendes, and swaps out Vin Diesel's sleeveless mumble growl for Tyrese's sleeveless comic relief. And in this film, law enforcement turns to Paul Walker and Tyrese, childhood homeboys, in order to take down crime boss and rat enthusiast Carter Verone.
The rat is gonna want out. Did you know that your average rat can chew through a steel drain pipe?
This sequel brings more car racing, butt shots, hip-hop culture, and comedy to the table for an overall haul of $236.4 million at the box office. Damn! Fast and the Furious Tokyo drifts in to the lowest box office take with $159 million at the worldwide box office. This installment loses all the previous stars, including the newcomers from Part 2, and evidently fits into the 4th spot in the franchise because most of its events take place after the 4th film, making Fast 4 the 3rd Fast and Fast 3 the 5th. However, even though I just broke that down like that, there is still a Bermuda Triangle full of plot holes and timeline gaps that would give Chris Nolan's Tenet a run for its money. Tokyo Drift is one of the most obvious yet under-addressed and overly dependent retcons that I've ever seen in all of film, and yet oddly works out the best for the one guy that actually dies in the end. Interesting. Some of the dialogue and acting is actually hard to get through, but in my opinion, it is an underrated installment to the franchise, and on the real, Sung Kang and the drifting make this movie worth checking out alone. Now, Fast and the Furious takes us back to LA and reunites Dom and Brian once again. Letty had been working for a cartel, and even though the holiday pay and the benefits were great, she was still moonlighting as an undercover informant for the FBI. Oh, and when her cover is blown, she gets killed, so now it's up to Mr. Potato Head and Blonde Keanu to find her killers and bring them to justice. Now, through a series of events and an act of good conscience, at the end of the film, Dom is tired of running from the law and decides to turn himself into custody. Dom goes to prison, and in the end, Mia and Brian drive off into the sunset to start a family. Yeah, the fuck right. This is just the beginning. At the end of the movie, we see some high-powered black cars pull up on the sides of the bus, and we know right then and there that Dom ain't doing nothing but time served. And with the return of Batman and Robin in this film, it outgrosses all the movies that came before it, pulling in $360.4 million at the worldwide box office. Fast 5 sees O'Connor and Toretto on the run, but this time in Brazil. Because of their blatant disregard for the speed limit and their use of blinkers when changing lanes, they now have discount Tommy Lee Jones from The Fugitive on their ass.
Welcome to The Rock.
Franchise Viagra. I say that because this franchise was chugging along until The Rock's Aquaphor lathered, cargo pants wearing, sponsored by Under Armour ass steps onto the scene. This franchise started printing Scrooge McDuck paper, cashing in a whopping $626.1 million at the box office. Again, let's not forget, this is the 5th installment in a franchise based on an old school 90s action film. And if you were to ask a handful of people at that time if they were getting ready to go see the next Fast and the Furious installment, they'd probably act like they were either better than these movies or they had no idea that these movies were still coming out and gaining popularity and financial success. So for it to do what it did this late in the game is nothing short of amazing. Now, I would say the Fast 5 is the Ocean's 11 of the franchise, in that it brings a collection of characters together in order to accomplish a big heist. It was the MCU and the DCEU of the franchise before all the major comic book films right now are trying to bring all their characters into one film for a big hoorah, and definitely stays at the top of my list as one of the best installments yet. Now, Fast 6 is one of my favorites in the entire franchise, and in spite of its open-ended post-credit scene, my personal belief, it should have been the conclusion of the franchise, especially when considering what follows. In this one, the team from Fast 5 have all gone their separate ways and they are all living the high life because they have previously pulled off every heist movie's protagonist's dream, which for them unfortunately meant destroying half of Brazil and killing who knows how many innocent bystanders in the process, all to steal a 10-ton safe from a drug dealer who actually hired Dom and his team at the beginning of the film to do a job. Mind you, this drug dealer's doing them a favor because, remember, From the previous movie, they are on the run and broke as a joke. And when this drug dealer happens to want a specific car from the heist that he set up, for some odd reason it rubs Dom the wrong way, and now we have a catalyst to the rest of the film. Look, literally, Dom is the problem here, okay? The drug dealer did nothing to this guy. It's one of those small details in a movie that you'd probably miss upon the first 10 viewings, but after you see it, it's kind of hard not to notice. But it's all good, because that last car chase scene all through Brazil carrying this safe was dope as fuck. Anyway, where was I? Part 6. The team is living the high life at this point in time until The Rock shows up on Dom's doorstep trying to recruit him and his team for a special mission to take down Owen Shaw, a ruthless terrorist who happens to be employing Letty, that's right, Dom's supposedly dead girlfriend from Part 4, who happens to still be alive. It's in the 6th installment when this franchise finally becomes the Godfather like Vin Diesel always wanted. Because as much as Dom doesn't want to be a part of that life, once The Rock shows up and shows him these photos of Letty,
They pull me back in.
by the end of the film, the team saves the world for the first time. They're granted a pardon and allowed back into the United States. They go back to LA, free as can be. Wonder Woman is the only casualty out of the entire mission. Han, of course, is super broken up about it and says, you know what, I think I'm gonna go to Tokyo. Dom breaks up with old girl from Part 5 and gets back with Letty. They have a barbecue over at the old house, they share a toast sponsored by Corona, and they all live happily ever after. That is until the post-credit scene where Jason mother effing Statham is shown getting out of the same car that hit and killed Han. He gets on the phone right quick, calls Dom and says,
Dominic Toretto. You don't know me. You're about to.
damn! When I saw that in the theater, I went nuts. Let me tell y'all like this. At this point in time, I'm already so on board with these films. I saw Part 6 like 7 times in the theater. I couldn't get enough, but I was also single at the time and had nothing else better to do. So thinking about the possibilities of what the next film could bring had me hella excited. Then, the unfortunate and heartbreaking news comes out that Paul Walker had passed away in a horrific accident. Yo, I've been a huge fan of his. There was just something about Paul Walker that I thought was so great. From teen movies like She's All That and Varsity Blues, to the gritty action of a Running Scared or Takers, or the fun and adventure in something like a Deep Blue or an 8 Below. Whatever he happened to be in might not have been the best movie, but 9 times out of 10, he was gonna make it a better experience. With that said, Furious 7 was a little bit more than halfway through its production when he had passed away, and the entire team was faced with the unimaginable challenge of finishing the movie without him. What James Wan and the entire crew was able to accomplish in the face of this tragedy deserves all the credit in the world. However, I do feel that Part 7 does not deliver on the promise of its premise. The trailers and the post-credit scene in the previous film are depicting Jason Statham as someone who's more ruthless than his brother Owen Shaw, who was already pretty damn ruthless to begin with. And it showcases how he is hell-bent on seeking revenge on the entire team for crippling his brother by any means necessary. So I'm expecting a real gritty manhunt with one foot in the fantasy world of Fast and the Furious, but maybe one foot left in reality as most of the movies had up until this point. But what Furious 7 actually turned out to be was a movie about a bunch of unknown characters that were underdeveloped, our team of heroes executing and accomplishing tasks on the first try every time that would be impossible for even SEAL Team 6. And then every now and again, Jason Statham's character would actually show up, say a couple menacing one-liners, and then fire off a couple rounds. And that was about it. And this movie also said F reality and stepped into the Matrix. There were no stakes whatsoever, and it was too unrealistic even for your homie. The best part was the saddest part, and that was the touching goodbye to Paul Walker in the end. But regardless of my thoughts, in the end of the day, this movie was the highest critic and fan rated film in the franchise, catapulting this movie to 1.5 billion with a B dollars at the worldwide box office. Fate of the Furious. Now this one right here racks up 1.2 billion at the worldwide box office, but it doubles down on the dumb by presenting us with a set of circumstances in which our American government would require and need the help and assistance of our car enthusiast turned heisters, who at this point in an alternate timeline taking place in a future multiverse movie streaming in a future metaverse based on a script written by ChatGPT, have now become a full-on covert league of counter-terrorists, Navy SEALs, CIA intelligent superheroes, trained and licensed by the same creators responsible for the dialogue and storylines of the last 4 Transformers movies. And to be honest, it's not that these movies have turned into a Saturday morning cartoon while we're watching Wile E. Coyote come up with faster vehicles and bigger bombs to catch the Roadrunner. For me, it's the disrespect to the characters' supposed core values, principles, and convictions. Now, I did extensive research on every film in this franchise, and I recorded Dom referring to or stating how important family was to him 669 times. Alright, I ain't gonna front. I didn't really do all of that research, but let's just be frank. We know how much he says it because it is now a running joke in pop culture. So when I see him working with that same dude that killed his homie back in Tokyo, and he hires that same guy to save his son from the goons in this movie, it reminds me of a time in the first movie when he snapped on a guy just for calling him a snitch.
SWAT came into my house because somebody knocked me out. It was you.
In this movie and all of the people surrounding it, the writers, the directors, the actors themselves, the people that came up with the characters, that live in and breathe these characters over the number of years, expect us to buy this shit. Fuck you. But wait, there's more. The Fast Saga? Then you got some nerve. Saga? This is a telenovela at best. Once again, the team has gone their separate ways after saving the world for a second time, and this time it's Dom's brother playing the main villain role. Hold up, brother? For someone who's referenced how important family is and how important it means to you like 669 times, the fact that you've never mentioned a brother in 8 previous movies, expecting us to buy it in this of all franchises, is more disrespectful than when Disney had no actual plans for the prequel trilogy and decided to end it by saying that Rey was related to Palpatine. Vin, listen, you and John Cena look nothing alike. This fool evidently kills your pops, and this is at a time when you're not even in the street life. You're not living by that one code. You feel me? So why in the hell would you not call the cops on this dude? Your sister never brings him up, Letty never mentions him, and when Brian was an undercover FBI agent hoping to infiltrate your crew, assuming that he did all the thorough background checks on the Torettos, he don't ever mention that you got a brother either. Script don't make no sense, player.
Man, this is some bullshit.
If I'm being honest, I don't even remember the plot to this kangaroo crap. I remember something about Cardi B being some kind of international agent that has the ability to fake arrest Dom just to get him out of a bind. But I'm thinking, we've been following this dude for years, and when we haven't been following, he's either been off the grid or on the run. How in the hell are you making connections like this? I feel like a math teacher right now, and I want to tell the movie to show its work. And this movie said F jumping the shark. They done sent Ludacris and Jody from Baby Boy to space in a goddamn Pontiac Ferrero retrofitted with duct tape and rocket boosters. But yo, that's not even the unbelievable part. The part that's hard for me to swallow is the fact that Lucas Black and Bow Wow of all people are the rocket scientists that built this space hoopty. Now thinking about it, it could be because a class of 5th graders wrote the script for Fast Saga during recess, or the fact that this movie came out at the tail end of a pandemic, that it only took in $726.2 million at the worldwide box office. A significant step down from Fast 8's $1.2 billion, but still leaps and bounds beyond Black Adam's $393.3 million. Burns, doesn't it? Now, even though I'm crapping on the last 3 movies for sure, this franchise still has 6 great installments, in my opinion, that are also critically and fan approved. And this franchise does have mega box office success, so no matter where you sit on the spectrum of whether or not these movies do or don't work for you, or if you're like me and you think 1 through 6 is basically the Citizen Kane of car chase action movies, you still gotta pay attention and you gotta pay mad respect to the fact that Fast and the Furious is a universal juggernaut of a franchise. Fast X is touted as being the beginning to the end, as it is the first part in a 2-part finale to the entire saga. Apparently, this is going to be the most expensive Fast film made to date, and it's going to be bringing all our superheroes back for one last ride. And I do mean all of our superheroes because they just added Captain Marvel and Aquaman to the cast. So even though I don't necessarily have high hopes that this film right here will be able to get back to the realism or the grittiness or the sensible storylines of, let's say, a Fast 4, 5, and 6, it was the notorious B.I.G. and Bone Thugs and Harmony song, Notorious Thugs, mixed into the trailer theme, along with some of the action, the addition of Jason Momoa and his connection to the cartel leader in Part 5, and the sheer curiosity to how this entire saga is possibly going to end that still has me pumped for the next installment. Fast X is going to be hitting theaters, and you know I'm about to bring you my thoughts, feelings, and opinions, so stay tuned for that. And just in case you didn't receive the newsletter, my wife and I have been expecting, and our son blessed us with his present on April 30th, around 10:55 or so p.m. It's been a wonderful hustle over the past week or so. So while I am super busy and I might have to forego a couple of reviews, I do want to let you know that I am going to attempt to be as consistent and timely as possible with my reviews. And I want to let you know off the top that I do appreciate your understanding, your patience, and your continued support. With that said, help your homie continue to grow with that like and subscribe. Your homie, Jay Greene, I'm out.